The jungle moon of Velharanine hung like a jewel in the vast quiet of space, untouched by war, industry, or greed, a place where even sound felt sacred. Commander Elijah Voss stepped carefully across the moss-covered stone path, his breath steady but his heart alert. He was no stranger to alien worlds, no novice to first contact, but something about Velharanine stirred a deep stillness in him. The Kari had never shown themselves before, not to humans, not to anyone. Their messages came in bursts of scent, fragments of movement, patterns of bioluminescent colors observed by drones at a distance. Now, for the first time, they had invited humanity to meet. Elijah's mission was to extend peace, share knowledge, and learn, though the weight of uncertainty pressed heavier than the humid air around him. His team stood back, near the edge of the glade, watching with quiet tension. A single offering, stone, dark and polished, stood in the center of the moonlit clearing. On it rested a bowl of roots, glowing softly with natural biolight. Elijah reached out to place a gift beside it, a pendant shaped like earth, encased in glass. But as his hand brushed the stone, an edge sharper than it seemed sliced into his palm. He hissed quietly, pulling back. Blood dripped onto the stone, glistening crimson in the soft silver light. And then, something happened that none of them expected. From the shadows beyond, the ferns stepped a tall figure, elegant, graceful, and otherworldly. Her skin shimmered in shades of blue and violet, alive with shifting light patterns. Her movements were deliberate, like flowing water, silent but filled with purpose. The Kari priestess, unlike anything they had imagined, approached him slowly. Elijah did not move. His training told him to stand still. Her eyes, large and reflective like twin pools of deep ocean, locked onto his wounded hand. A word, without hesitation, she took it gently in her slender fingers and lowered her head. What followed was strange, beautiful, and unsettling. She licked the blood from his palm slowly, reverently, as though performing a rite passed down for centuries. Not a sound came from the jungle. Even the insects fell quiet. The humans stood frozen, their gear recording every moment, unsure whether they were witnessing a healing ritual or a claim. Elijah stared at the priestess, his mind racing, trying to read her intent. Her expression was unreadable but not hostile. When she finished, she held his hand gently, almost with care, and looked up into his eyes. Then, in a voice clear and accented but unmistakably Terran standard, she spoke, "The pact is accepted. You are now bound." The words echoed in the clearing like thunder under silk. Elijah blinked. His crew whispered behind him, "Bound? Bound to what? To whom? What had he just agreed to?" The priestess tilted her head, as if hearing something he could not. The glowing roots in the bowl began to pulse softly, almost like a heartbeat, and the offering stone hummed beneath their feet. A gust of wind passed through the clearing, carrying a scent he couldn't describe, but it felt like memory, like fire and soil and sky. He didn't know it yet, but with a single cut, the mission had changed. He was no longer just a diplomat. The Kari had chosen him. And somewhere deep in the living jungles of Velharanine, ancient systems began to stir. The pact was sealed, back at the temporary human base on the edge of Velharanine's jungle. The atmosphere was tense and heavy with unanswered questions. Inside the command tent, the glow of holoscreens reflected off worried faces, and whispered debates circled the room like restless insects. Commander Elijah Voss sat in silence, his wounded hand now wrapped, though still tingling strangely with warmth, as if something unseen pulsed beneath the bandage. Across from him, the Kari priestess, now identified through cultural data. As High Seer Elthia remained, seated, unmoving, her large silver-blue eyes quietly studying every detail around her. She mimicked human gestures in subtle ways, tilting her head when someone spoke, folding her hands as the crew did, but saying nothing. The translator AI failed repeatedly to make full sense of her communication style, which was a complex blend of color shifts, scent pulses, and layered symbolism. Even when she used Terran Standard, her words carried meanings that felt deeper than language could hold. Despite the silence, strange things began happening around Elijah. When he walked near Kari structures, towers of living stone grown from the jungle itself, they began to hum softly, resonating with a pitch that matched his heartbeat. The local fauna, strange and beautiful creatures with eyes like crystals and limbs like petals, would pause and bow their heads when he passed. A pair of young Kari emissaries had come close to him, only to retreat in near panic. Whispering a word that the translator hesitated to define, Vorel texted something. Between Mark Twain and Living Star? At first, Elijah thought it was coincidence or misunderstanding, but Althea soon ended the doubt. That evening, under a sky filled with twin moons and glowing clouds, she stood beside a pool of still water, her voice soft but steady as she spoke of the old Kari tales of a sky-born outsider, whose blood would awaken the slumbering bond between world and spirit, who would arrive not with war, but with a wound, and whose presence would signal the beginning of a great change. The Kari had waited for centuries, maybe longer, for this sign. And now, to them, Elijah was no longer just a human envoy. He was the chosen, the sky-bleeder of legend. Elijah struggled to believe it. He was a soldier turned diplomat, a man of logic and action, not myth and prophecy. But everywhere he looked, the signs mounted. Even the Kari jungle seemed to respond to his presence. Vines shifted slightly in his direction. Flowers opened as he approached. The crew grew nervous, unsure how to treat him, now some with awe, others with worry. The line between diplomacy and something deeper had been crossed, and there was no going back. Althea followed him constantly, not like a shadow, but like a guardian, or perhaps a witness. She spoke little, but her presence alone sent a message. He was not just among the Kari, he was of them now. His blood had been accepted, his touch recognized. As he stood one night on the ridge overlooking the glowing valley of the Kari heartland, he wondered what it meant to carry a role he had never asked for. But beyond the beauty and mystery, a quiet storm was forming. In a high-orbiting Terran relay station, a coded signal reached Earth. It was a warning, sent from a satellite drone near Velharanine's outer system. Other eyes had taken notice. An unknown fleet had been spotted at the edge of the sector, silent, watching. The message was brief but clear. Alien forces were observing the human presence on Velharanine, and one of them had broadcast a dark symbol known to Terran intelligence as a marker of the Zarkon Dominion, a ruthless empire that saw a rising. Powers as threats to be removed before they could grow. Earth's High Command read the signal and fell into emergency meetings. Somewhere, out among the stars, a new game had begun. Someone didn't like that humanity had just become a legend on a world not their own. The days on Velharanine moved like dreams, now strange, slow, and filled with beauty that seemed alive in ways Elijah Voss couldn't explain. The Kari way of life unfolded before him like a tapestry of living rituals, from forests that sang when touched by moonlight, to dances performed in near silence beneath the stars, dances, not for entertainment, but for memory and spirit. Althea walked beside him always, her presence more guiding than guarding now, answering his questions in layers of poetic phrases, half scent and half gesture, that the translator AI still struggled to interpret. He began to understand more without needing words. Feeling the rhythms of the Kari world pulse beneath his feet, as if the ground itself breathed through him. But that peace shattered when the orbiting station flashed red with an alert. Unidentified fleet had entered the outer system, fast and silent. The Terran satellite relayed an urgent image to the base, sharp, claw-shaped ships, metallic green with pulsating orange lights, the unmistakable design of the Zarkon Dominion. Within hours, a transmission came through. It was a voice layered, with static and insectoid rasping, translated roughly into human language. They accused Earth of interfering with undeveloped civilizations, claiming that the Kari were too primal to be contacted, and that Elijah's presence had disrupted the galactic order. Their demand was clear: surrender Elijah Voss, or they would enforce galactic stability by any means necessary. The Kari Council, though soft-spoken and non-violent, stood firm. We would not hand over the chosen. They did not see Elijah as a mistake, they saw him as destiny. And then something incredible happened. The planet itself responded. As the Zarkon fleet grew closer, parts of the jungle began to move, not just with life, but with purpose. Trees shifted position. Giant vines, thicker than starship cables, rose from the ground. Towering plant creatures, shaped like beasts of myth and made of living bark, emerged from hidden groves. The air shimmered as flowers opened, releasing signals no human could hear, but every Kari turned toward them in solemn readiness. Deep underground, forgotten structures lit up for the first time in ages. Elthea brought Elijah to a sacred chamber hidden in a root cavern beneath a massive hill. They're etched into the stone in glowing symbols. Was a history lost to time a story of how the Kari were once part of a larger cosmic force that maintained balance in the stars, but chose to withdraw after their unity fractured? The planet itself, it turned out, was alive in a way science had never imagined. The jungle was not just a home, it was a conscious entity, a network of roots and energy called the Hive Root. It recognized Elijah not as a stranger, but as a missing piece. Only a bonded being marked by blood, chosen by fate, could fully awaken its defense systems. The Kari could not do it alone. Thera looked at him with calm certainty and said, "You are the bridge, Elijah. It's a flame in the soil, the root in the sky." The fleet above prepared for strike. Time was running short. The diplomatic path had failed. The Zarkon would only be stopped by strength, not reason. Elijah faced a choice. He could flee and let Velharanine fall, or he could trust what he didn't fully understand. As a soldier, he had fought many battles. As a diplomat, he had saved lives with words. But now he had to become something more, something new. He stood at the entrance of the Hivert's core, vines parting for him like a curtain of breath. Ilthea placed a hand on his chest, her voice soft, steady. "You may not return the same." Elijah gave a faint smile, worn but sincere. "If I come back, I won't come back human." With that, he stepped into the living light of the Hive Root, vanishing beneath the ground as the jungle whispered his name to the stars. Above, the sky darkened as the Zarkon ships began their descent. Unaware that Velharanine was no longer unguarded, and that a storm rooted in human blood and ancient memory was waiting for them, beneath the surface of Velharanine, where no light reached and the air was thick with the scent of old life and deep memory, Elijah Voss was no longer only human. As he stepped into the core of the Hive Root, it welcomed him not as an outsider, but as a long-lost part of itself. Vines wrapped gently around his limbs, pulsing softly with energy. Strange lights danced before his eyes, not made of matter, but of memory, and soon his thoughts were no longer his own. The planet opened its mind to him. He saw glimpses of the Kari's distant past, of great towers that grew from crystal forests, of a time when they traveled the stars with harmony and wisdom. But their unity shattered when greed and pride from other species infected the balance. The Kari chose to exile themselves, burying their cities, silencing their skies, and binding their hopes into the soil itself. Now, after centuries of silence, the chosen had come. Elijah's mind expanded until he felt the heartbeat of the jungle, the whisper of every root, and the echo of every soul. His blood changed subtle at first, just a warmth in his veins, but then his senses sharpened. His skin faintly shimmered with Kari glow, and something inside him shifted. He understood now, not just with logic, but with instinct, that he was the bridge between human flame and Kari root. When he returned to the surface, he walked with a stillness that shook the air. The Kari bowed as he passed, and even the creatures of the forest fell silent in his wake. Above, the Zarkon dropships roared down like claws from the sky, ready to strike. But Velharanine did not tremble. With a single outstretched hand, Elijah called to the Hivertan the ground. Obeyed. Vines as thick as starship holes lashed upward, striking the dropships mid-air and tearing them apart like paper. The earth opened beneath Zarkon walkers, swallowing them whole. The jungle became a weapon of precision and fury, not mindless but alive with purpose. And through it all, Elijah stood at the center. His voice joined with the Kari in a song that vibrated across the battlefield. The sound was not just music, it was a frequency of life, and it tore through Zarkon communications like a wave of silence, disabling their coordination, leaving them lost and confused. But the enemy was not finished. The main fleet remained above, circling like hungry beasts, preparing to unleash orbital firepower. From their position in the stars, they saw Valhera as a target, not a being. Elijah knew that without help, even the planet's strength could be overwhelmed. He raised his hand to the sky and sent a coded message through the jungle's signal trees. Message carried up through natural towers that acted like organic antennas, far older than any satellite. The message reached the edge of the system, and Earth heard it. For the first time, humanity did not respond with conquest or colonization, but with protection. Hours later, as the Zarkon fleet moved into firing formation, the stars behind them lit up with flashes of white-blue light. Terran ships, massive and glowing with solar armor, emerged from faster-than-light travel, spreading across space like a wall of steel and flame. Their captain sent only one message, clear and sharp: "You threaten one of us, you threaten all of us." In that moment, the balance of the galaxy shifted. Valhera was no longer just a hidden world. It was now bound to humanitide as a subject, but as an ally. And Elijah, standing beneath twin moons with the jungle alive around him, knew the real battle was only beginning, but this time, they wouldn't face it alone. The sky over Valhera was calm again, painted in soft gold and violet as dawn rose across the horizon, casting its glow over a jungle that had once been silent and hidden, now breathed freely beneath the protection of a united force. The Zarkon fleet, once poised to erase a world, had withdrawn reluctantly, yes, but with a hesitation born of respect. Elijah Voss had stood at the meeting point of two great tides, the weight of Terran presence above, ready to defend, and the ancient strength of a living planet below, rooted in unity and memory. Through diplomacy shaped by both human reason and Kari wisdom, Elijah brokered a fragile but historic truce. The galaxy had watched closely. Now the Kari, once thought of as too primitive to matter, were being offered a seat at the great table of civilizations. Not as a curiosity or a footnote, but as a sovereign voice, backed by one of the most powerful species in known space. Valhera, once untouched, now stood as a symbol of what was possible when understanding grew where war once threatened to bloom. Elijah had the chance to return to Earth. The Terran High Command offered him honor, promotion, even a seat in the Galactic Assembly, but he declined. He no longer belonged to one world alone. His connection to Valhera was deep now, flowing through him like breath and light. The planet had accepted him, and so had the Kari. He chose to remain not as a hero, but as a guide, standing beside High Seer Elthira as her people stepped cautiously into a wider galaxy. Together, they helped prepare the Kari for contact, for diplomacy, for the complex truths of a universe filled with both wonder and danger. The jungle, once closed off and hidden, now welcomed visitors, carefully, respectfully. Human scientists worked alongside Kari biokeepers, learning the language of scent and root, helping to preserve the balance rather than disturb it. Valhera became something more than a moonit, became a bridge. Stories spread far beyond. Its orbit of the man who bled upon sacred stone, the priestess who accepted him, and the forest that rose to defend its own. He had not saved Valhera with weapons, but by listening, by trusting, and by offering himself to something greater. And though his body still bore human form, those who looked into his eyes saw the echo of ancient green light within them. The final days of the first cycle after the pact, as celebrations echoed through the glowing glades and Kari music filled the air with gentle resonance. To children, a young Kari, with glistening skin and a curious human boyron beneath. The towering canopy, their laughter soft and full of life. They played without fear, weaving through vines and sunbeams, as if the jungle itself smiled at them. Perched on a high branch, Elthia watched quietly, her eyes reflecting the dancing light below. Elijah stood beside her, one hand resting on the living wood, the other wrapped around the pendant he had once placed on the offering stone, now cracked, but still glowing faintly. Elthira's voice was soft as the wind that moved through the leaves, filled with both memory and meaning. He bled, and through that pain, the stars listened. and for the first time in a long while the stars did not answer with silence, but with peace.